In this video, I'm gonna go through 26 different tips on how you can make better outdoor and adventure videos. So whether you're just trying to capture your snowboard trip or you wanna make a full-on adventure film, these 26 tips are gonna help you craft better videos. Now, if we haven't met before, my name is Jeven Dovey, and on this channel, I teach you how to make better videos. But I also have a second channel that's all dedicated to making adventure films. And I do a mix of overland style content in my Jeep, or I'll go mountain biking or go climb some of the biggest peaks like Cotopaxi down in Ecuador. And from these trips, I've come up with a bunch of different techniques and I figured out the perfect gear to use to capture the moment. So this video is broken down into two sections. First, we're gonna go over gear, and then the second half of this video is all gonna be around ways that you can use this gear and some things that you should think about when you're out capturing your footage. Now, this video is sponsored by Goal Zero, and I'll include a link down below the description to where you can check out their batteries, which are perfect when you're out adventuring and capturing these stories. But we'll talk more about Goal Zero later. I don't want to waste any more of your time, so let's just get right into how you can make better adventure videos. Number one is camera choice. And I don't want you to get hung up on specific cameras or specific brands, because nowadays, pretty much any camera that's coming out is a good camera. Like, everything can capture good looking video and everything will help you be able to tell your story. But which camera should you decide? Because there are just so many options available. Well, I think it comes down to a few different things. You need to think through what's most important to you and what do you need in a camera to capture the kind of videos that you're creating. So a few things to look at is one, resolution. What resolution do you need? I like to distribute all my videos in 4K here on YouTube. Now, I also need slow motion. I like to shoot in 120 frames per second. So I chose a camera that shoots in 4K, 120 frames per second. Now, you might not need that. You might only need 60 frames per second. And another thing that you want to think about is stabilization. So whatever camera that you're using, you want to think through, how are you going to stabilize the footage? So if you're just hand holding the camera all the time, well, you're going to want a camera that has better stabilization internal, because we're shooting outdoor adventure style videos. We're always going to be on the move. Things are going to be shaky. So something like a GoPro or a 360 camera might be a good option, so you're always stable. Whereas if you're someone who's going to be using a gimbal or a tripod like I'm using, you can get away with cameras that aren't as good at stabilization. I use the Sony a7S Mark III, and the reason I use it is resolution, slow motion, low light. That's a huge thing for me. We're shooting outdoors. There's a lot of times where I'm shooting with the stars above me, and so I need the ability to shoot in these lower light situations. And this camera does have stabilization. Now, it's not as good as some other cameras on the market, but it's still good enough to handhold the camera and get some good looking shots. I also bring gimbals with me on some trips, and so for me, it's a good balance of all the things that I need in a camera, but I know there's plenty of other good options out there. You might find a Canon is a better camera to use, or a Panasonic, or a Nikon, or a Fuji. So before you dive into which camera you're going to buy, think through what are the most important features that you care about, and then you can start finding the cameras that fit those and just do some research. There's so much information here on YouTube, and you just have to figure out which camera works best for you for the kind of videos that you're creating. Now, number two is a tripod. So I'm using the Peak Design carbon fiber tripod. I've been using it for a long time, and it just works super well because I can put it on the side of my backpack and it doesn't add a ton of extra weight. Now, a tripod is good because you can put your camera down and you can walk away from it. You can go at a distance and you have a good shot. I've seen a lot of adventure films here on YouTube where they'll just prop the camera up like on a rock down there on the ground because they didn't bring a tripod with them. And it's hard to get good shots when you're always trying to use the environment to prop up your camera. With a tripod, I could put the camera at eye level and talk directly to camera. But also I could like put the tripod in different spots and get cool shots of me like wandering through this environment. Or when I'm in my Jeep, we'll often put the tripod out on the trail really far away to grab these long shots and not always have to rely on something like a drone to be able to get shots of us moving through a landscape. There are so many uses for a good, solid tripod, and so I suggest it's something that you definitely invest in. There's a lot of cheap tripods on the market, and there's also a lot of like small tripods, which might seem like a great idea for adventure style content, but you want something that can at least get the height of view. You want it to be able to raise up to 5-6 feet, because if you have a tripod that's low on the ground, well, you're always going to get low shots. Sometimes you want the camera up high looking down, and it also just gives you a ton of flexibility to create different shots when you're out filming. I highly suggest bringing a tripod if you can. On some of my mountain climbs, I don't bring a tripod with me, and I just bring something smaller, and it's something that I always wish I had. So depending on what kind of content you're creating, you have to play this balance of weight versus like what's most important. And I've found that, yeah, tripod has become one of those most essential things, and I use it all the time when I'm out filming. Number 3 has to do with battery, because having enough battery for your adventures is super essential, especially with all the camera gear that we're going to be talking about. So one thing that you want to do is bring enough batteries, but you don't always just want to carry a ton of extra batteries. And that's where our sponsor of today's video comes in, and Goal Zero. So Goal Zero makes a bunch of different styles of backup batteries that can help you when you're out creating your adventure films. So I use the 1500X in my Jeep. Basically, this battery has the capacity to run my fridge, charge all of my cameras, charge all of my drones, charge basically anything that I bring with me. And it gives me a peace of mind that I'm never gonna run out of power when I'm on the road. And on this battery, you have 2 AC ports, you have 2 USB-C, 2 USB-A, a 12 volt, and you have multiple inputs. So you could charge this 3 different ways. I have a solar panel on top of my Jeep, I have an AC power on the inside of my Jeep, and you can also get an additional hookup, and this battery can hook directly into your car and be a true dual battery system. So when I stop moving and I'm camping, this becomes the power for everything. And it becomes the way that I'm able to run my laptop, charge all my batteries, and basically have power at any point when I'm out on an adventure. One of the cool things about this battery in particular is that on the screen, you can see exactly how much battery life you have left. It tells you how many hours until you're empty. So currently, as I'm charging some different drone batteries in a controller, I have 43 hours until empty. So I have plenty of battery to last me a long time. And also they have an app that you can use so that when I'm driving, I can see exactly everything that's going on with my battery, even though my battery is mounted in the back of my truck here. Now the 1500X can also be hooked up into your home and be a backup battery solution. If your power goes out for any reason, it's super helpful to have a backup battery to run the essential things in your house. And when I'm not near my Jeep, I carry the Goal Zero Flip 24, which is a small little battery pack, but it allows me to charge my phone a couple times. So I know wherever I'm at, I always have a backup power source. So I'll include a link down below in the description to where you can find out more information about the 1500X or any of the other Goal Zero batteries that they offer. This has become an essential part of my kit when I'm out with my Jeep, so that I know that I have power anywhere that I go. Number 4, let's talk about wide lenses, because I think one of the essential tools that you need to bring with you when you're out creating these kind of videos is a wide lens. Now, if you're someone who's going to be using a GoPro, a 360 camera, you're already going to be having a wide lens, because that's what's built into those cameras and what makes them super easy to use for filming outdoor style content. But if you are someone who's using a mirrorless, a DSLR, well, you'll want to get a wide lens. That could be something like the 20mm 1.8 on the Sony, which is what I'm using right now. Could be something like a 24-105 if you want to use a zoom lens. Could be a 16-35. There's a lot of options, but you definitely want a lens that's somewhere in the range of 20 to 24 millimeters. You don't want to have anything more punched in, because you want to have that ability to capture wider field of view. If you're going to be talking to camera, if you're going to be doing vlog style content, you need something wider. I'm just hand holding this camera right now, and I'm using the 20mm, and I can get a good shot of myself super easy. I don't have to bring a bunch of extra gear. But if I was using something like the 35, well, it's much more cropped in and it's a lot harder to get this shot. Also, when you're out here, you're gonna wanna be doing landscape photography because you're gonna be getting some awesome views and you're gonna want some wide lenses for that as well. So I think an essential tool for crafting these videos is having a wide lens as part of your arsenal. Now, number 5, wow, this rock is really uncomfortable. Number 5 is additional lenses. So right now I'm shooting on my 55 1.8, and it gives you a different perspective than the 20mm I was just working on. Now, I like to bring a few lenses with me when I'm out filming. I'll bring a zoomed in lens, whether that's some additional primes if I want to shoot with my primes, or I might bring something like my 70-200. It gives you a completely different perspective than your super wide lens. And I like having a range because when you can switch it up and move between long focal length and wide lenses, it's gonna make your footage more dynamic when you cut it together. When I'm out doing my overland films, one of the things I love doing is putting a long lens on my camera and shooting the trucks at a distance because you get such a different perspective than always using a wide lens. Now, you could use zoom lenses, which I think is a great option. You could have the 24-105, like I was saying earlier, and the 70-200, and the 16-35, and you basically have the trifecta of lenses that gives you every range that you could want. But you might not want to always carry all of that glass. It ends up becoming super heavy. And like I was saying earlier, you really have to play this balance of what gear you're bringing versus, making your pack lighter and also the other gear that you have to bring. You can't always bring everything. And also, sometimes if you do bring too much gear, you're not going to know what to use and you end up not using half of it. So I like to make specific choices before I go out, and I'll choose what set of gear I'm going to use for that trip, and I try to use all the gear in different ways. So when it comes to my lens setup, a lot of times what I bring out is 20mm, good for vlogging, good for capturing those wide shots. A 35, which I love using on my gimbal. It's a wide, but it's still a little bit punched in, but it's not super long. And then the 55 or the 85. Now, the other lens I like to bring out instead of those lenses would be the 70-200. So I'd bring out like my 20, 35, and then 70-200. So I'm always playing this balance of not trying to bring out too much gear, but having enough to be able to capture a range of different styles of shots when I'm out filming. But you also don't have to bring out tons of gear. You could run with just one lens. And a lot of times when I'm doing like a climbing film, I'll have a camera with one lens because I don't want to change lenses on the mountain, and I also need to cut back on gear. Now, a lot of times when I'm only bringing one lens, I wish that I brought a few extra, but sometimes you just have to play that battle of, well, is it important to have more lenses or is it important to cut some weight? Okay, so how do I get down? Number 6 is for those of you that want to do this kind of content where you're talking directly to camera, and that is a way to hold your camera, have it a little bit away from your face. Now, you can definitely just hand hold the camera, and that's what I've done on some of these tips already, but you also can bring something specifically for the camera, like a switch pod. I've used a switch pod on a lot of my videos because it just makes it super easy and it's lightweight and it doesn't add a lot of extra to your pack, like you just slip it in the side. Right now, because I only have my tripod with me, I'm using my Peak Design carbon fiber tripod as like a tool to hold the camera away from me, get a little bit wider shot and make it a little bit more stable than if I was hand holding it. Because this is a carbon fiber tripod, I can use it in this way. But you could also just get like a small tabletop tripod. I was talking about earlier, you don't necessarily want a tabletop tripod for everything, but for vlogging style content, you can get a little plastic one that's an easy grip for you to hold, and then it makes this whole process so much easier. If you're going to be doing a lot of talking to camera, well, having some sort of way to hold the camera so that it's up away from your arm will make it so that it's easier to capture this and your arm won't get as fatigued when you're filming this kind of content. It is something you need to think about because if you're always holding your arm up like this, yeah, it does start hurting after a while. Having a tripod or like a switch pod or something like that, it makes the process a little bit easier and they don't add a ton of extra weight. So number 7 is filters. You're going to want to get a set of filters to do some different things when you're out filming. So I personally use ND filters for most of what I shoot because I want to be able to get the background out of focus. And you do that by opening your aperture wide open. But when you open your aperture wide open, well, you let a ton of light into your sensor and you're going to need some way to close that down. Now, personally, I like to shoot all of my footage in the cinematic way of shooting at double that of my frame rate so that I have proper motion blur, because the only way to really fix the overexposure is by cranking your shutter speed or using an ND filter. And so an ND filter basically is sunglasses on your camera. And I'm using an ND filter right now. It's a variable ND filter, so I can use a range of ND, which is neutral density, and I can, depending on the situation, depending on what lens, I can change the strength of this filter. Now I have a filter case of different filters that I bring with me in this handy dandy pouch. I have my neutral density, I have what's called a cine bloom, and it creates halation around bright objects. So if you have headlights or you have a headlamp, something like that, it will create kind of a cool little mist around it. And then I also bring a polarizer with me. And the polarizer is to help cut down on reflections. So if I'm shooting something like water or snow, well, you can get rid of a lot of those reflections by using a polarizer. Those are essentially the three filters that I bring with me everywhere I go. I have this case from Shimoda. It keeps them all nice and safe. I even ran this over with my Jeep on the Pony Express, an adventure I did a couple years ago, and all my filters survived, which I was surprised because it's just a soft case. But if I'm trying to get more cinematic looking footage and have more control over my image, I always bring my filters with me when I'm out on the trail. Number 8 is audio. Audio is super important because if you want to capture you talking, explaining what's going on, you want to capture the people that you're with, you want to capture the sounds of the environment, well, you're going to need some way to capture that. So you need a good microphone. Now, there's two different ways that I use audio. I use what's called a shotgun mic that goes right on top of my camera. And this is great for those situations where I'm close to camera, I'm talking directly to camera, and I could just need audio right here. This is also great to capture environmental sounds because it's going to capture anything in front of camera. So you can point it at whatever you're looking at and capture those sounds. So if you're at the ocean and you want to get some ocean wave sounds, we'll just point your shotgun mic at it and capture those sounds, and you can use that in your edit. Now, the other microphone that I use is the one that you see right here, right? I've been using it this whole time. It's a wireless lavalier mic, and I use the DJI mic, which is 2 transmitters and a receiver, and it comes with this super handy charging case. So each one of these devices has about 5 hours of battery life, but you could charge it at 2 additional times using this case. So I could be out filming for a couple days and I don't need to ever charge this case because I can continually charge my gear and I always have good audio, and it's wireless. I mean, you've seen how I've been using it in this video. I can walk way out over there, and because the microphone is right here on my chest, well, you're always gonna hear the same audio, whether I'm close to camera, far away. They're 2 different styles of microphones, but I use them both when I'm out filming. So number 9 is you want to have a windscreen for your microphone. Both styles of microphones that we just talked about, you'll want to have some sort of wind protection. Right now I'm walking down this mountain and there's a slight breeze hitting me, and you would hear all this if this windscreen wasn't on the microphone. You want to cut out all wind sounds, and when you're shooting outdoor content, a lot of times there's going to be a breeze, there's going to be wind, and one way to mitigate that is just having a windscreen. And so you can get them for your shotgun mic. They look like a big furry thing on top of your camera, and they also come with the wireless audio transmitters like the DJI mic. So it's just something always to have on you, and you want to make sure that you don't forget it when you leave, because sometimes these little fuzzy things, they could just get misplaced. So it's always a good idea to film with wind protection on, because then you know that you'll always get the best audio. Number 10 is a drone that can track yourself, if you can use a drone when you're out filming. So having a drone that has tracking capabilities just makes it so much easier to capture footage of yourself. Just hiking up here to this mountain, I was using my DJI Mavic 3, and I was doing all these different movements, and I didn't really have to worry about the drone when it was in the automation mode. It just would follow around me, whether that's in front, behind, off to the side, and I could hike up the mountain and I could get some cool looking shots. It just makes the whole process so much easier when you're using a drone and you're out doing this kind of stuff, especially when you're solo. even if you are working with other people, having tracking capabilities does make a big difference. You can manually fly and grab some awesome shots, but when you're out doing this kind of stuff, you don't know what's going to happen, and sometimes it is useful just to have that tracking capability. Now, also with a drone, having obstacle avoidance is super helpful. So having the 360 obstacle avoidance in the Mavic 3 just makes it so I don't hit anything. It doesn't run into the side of a mountain, doesn't hit a tree, it doesn't run into, rocks over there. Whereas if you're using something like the DJI Air 2S or like the Autel Lite Plus, another drone where it only has sensors on, say, the front, back, top, and bottom, well, then you might swing into something on the side. If you're using something like the Mini 2, you have no sensors and no tracking, and so the shots that you can get with a drone, especially when you're solo, are much more limiting. So when I'm out filming, I always take that into consideration, and if I can, I'm gonna bring my Mavic 3. I'm gonna bring the drone that has 360 obstacle avoidance and active track that works well. But I definitely think if you can fly where you're going and you have the ability to bring a drone with you, it's super useful because you get these big wide shots that really show off the landscape. Now, number 11 is have a second camera as an option. So your phone, it's a perfect second camera. I end up using my phone all the time just to grab quick shots when I don't want to pull out this camera. Another camera I often bring is like a little POV camera. So GoPros are great, 360 cameras are great, but I've been using the Insta360 Go 2, and that thing is like the size of my thumb, and it's just a great little camera to have in my pocket. And then if I need to get like a quick POV shot, well, I can put the lanyard on and I can get a super easy POV without having to mount like this big chest harness that you usually have to do with a GoPro. It just makes things a little bit easier. So there's a lot of options out there, and I highly suggest finding a secondary camera that's some sort of POV. Super wide lens, whether that's a 360, a GoPro, Go 2, but something where you can get these different angles that you can't get with your main camera. And sometimes a phone is the easiest second camera because it's always in your pocket. And depending on what you're shooting, there might be times where you just pull out the phone to grab a few shots. So come up with your mix of cameras, but I always like to have a few on me. My mirrorless camera, that's kind of my essential. And then I'll bring like a POV camera. I'll often have my phone and then a drone, which seems ridiculous, but when you're out filming, I do end up using everything. But if you are trying to save weight and you just want a small POV camera, well, you can still get awesome footage with it. I shot an entire film climbing Mount Shuckson up in Washington using the Insta360 Go 2. And on that project, I was able to capture some pretty awesome footage from this little tiny camera, and I just used the audio from the camera. And that was because we were doing a mountain climb and I didn't want to carry a ton of weight. And it was an interesting challenge. Now, you don't have to have all of this gear and all of these different tools. I just wanted to show you the range of different things that I've found are super useful. And you might be someone who just runs around with a GoPro and that works. But you still want to think about how you're using that camera to be able to get better footage than just always holding the camera out like this, or always having it on your helmet, or always having it on your chest. Number 12 is a phone that fell out of the pocket. But when you're looking for a camera backpack, a few things that you want is easy access to your gear, you want protection, and also you want to have space for all the extra things. So I have big pockets on the side, and you can see I can carry big water bottles with me on the side. And that's one thing that a lot of camera backpacks don't have, is a place for big like Nalgene's or hydro flasks. Also, you want to think about, well, what do you need access to right away? On these Shimoda bags, I have two big pockets. So I could put my cell phone, I could put my sunglasses, I could put my little POV camera, I could put extra batteries. Like, there's a lot of options here that I could use these big pockets for that are right on my chest and I have access to all the time. And having a camera backpack that's actually built for adventure is a huge advantage over just regular camera backpacks. I've gone through so many different camera backpacks over the years, and Shimoda's been the one that I've found works the best. Now, there are other adventure style camera backpacks coming out, more and more they're available, but you just need to look and see what features they have and make sure that all the gear that you want to bring will fit into the bag, but also all the extras will fit into the bag as well. Now, there's one more thing to talk about before we get into filming techniques, and that is media. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but you need to make sure you have enough memory before you go out and try to capture your adventure. So that means bringing extra cards or bringing extra hard drives or having a workflow where you're actually going to dump your media when you're out doing whatever it is that you're doing. I know this is one of those things that I've struggled with in the past because I've been on a trip and I didn't have the proper cables or I didn't have an extra hard drive to back up my data. So you just want to think through workflow before you actually go out on the adventure. So if you're going to be recording to cards and you're not going to be backing up your footage, you need to make sure that you have enough media to be able to capture as much content that you need for the trip. So that means bringing extra backup cards. And if you're going to be dumping, make sure that you know how long it takes to dump your cards from your camera to your hard drive and how much battery you need on your laptop to be able to do that. There's all these different components, and one thing I suggest is just before you go out, test everything. So test your whole workflow to make sure it works and figure out timing of everything. I've gone out on some overlanding trips where it's super cold and we'll be sitting there trying to transfer our data because we didn't bring enough memory cards, and it's like 10 degrees outside and we're freezing, but we need to have the space so we could shoot the next day. And it just becomes a big mess. Whereas if you just think through beforehand, just bring extra memory cards, or you just have a specific workflow that you follow, well, it's going to make the whole process so much easier. Now, number 14, it's not really camera gear as much as it's just essential gear when you're doing these kind of adventures. And that is all the extra stuff like snacks, water, and having places for them in your backpack, having sunscreen, having chapstick. Like, you want to think through all the things that you're going to need when you're out filming, because it's a lot of those extra things that we don't think about when we're so focused on the camera gear and the story that we're trying to tell. And then we get out to a location and we're like, oh man, forgot water. I've seen it happen multiple times where I've been out to a location, I'll have a big bottle of water and someone else will be like, oh, I completely forgot a bottle. Can I have some of yours? So one of the key things that you can do is make a list. Make a list of all the essentials that you need when you're going out and going filming. I have lists for when I'm going out and doing a video like this. I have lists for when I'm going overlanding. I have lists for when I'm going mountain climbing. I have lists when I'm doing a production with clients. When you think through occupations where there's high risk, things like a pilot, they have to have a checklist that they go through every time before they take off the plane. So you make your own checklists for the types of activities that you do, and you won't forget little things. And I've forgotten little things on so many different trips, and it always becomes just such a frustrating moment when you get somewhere and you needed this one little cable, and then you have to walk all the way back to where your car is to get this cable so that you can fly your drone. It happens, and the way to avoid having that happen is by creating lists. So think through all the extra things that you need when you're out making your videos, and over time, the more videos that you make, the more that you're doing this, the more that you'll figure out a solid list and just something to keep in your phone. I keep all of mine in my notes app. I just have a folder that's checklists before I go and do things, where there are a lot of little components that are easily missed. All right, so let's get into some filming techniques. And the first one is, how do you position the sun when you're out filming to get a better looking image? And this is super important because your sun is going to always be up in the sky. And if there's no clouds and it's a bright bluebird day like this, well, you're going to have to find the best position of where to put yourself, your subject, or the camera in relation to what it is that you're filming to be able to get a good looking image. So if I put myself dead center of the sun, I mean, it's bright, it's hard to see, I'm going to be squinty, but also it just looks really bad when everything's completely washed out. Typically when I'm working with myself or people, I want to have the sun at like a 3/4 or off to the side. And when I'm moving, it's going to fluctuate a little bit, and you've seen it as we've been walking around. But you want to have the sun in a position where it's not completely blasting the scene or blasting your subject. Somewhere off to the side, you want to have some texture. When you can have the sun at 3/4 or a side shot, you're creating depth by being able to have bright sections of your face and dark sections. And in a way, you're an artist and the sun is your paint, and you're creating these works of art. I know it's a cheesy way to say it, but in reality, what you're doing is you're creating more visual interest. So it's not just blasted with light and all one exposure behind or in front. I like to play around with having the sun off to the side, 3/4 behind. And yeah, it's not gonna be perfect. We're filming outdoor videos, outdoor content. Now, the other thing you wanna think about is where the sun is in the sky. So if the sun is straight up above, high noon, it's gonna look awful because you're gonna have these bags under your eyes and it's just not gonna be the most flattering look. Everything is also gonna be washed out. There's not gonna be any texture to the land behind you. So if you're shooting later in the day, or you're like in winter and the sun's a little lower, you're gonna have better opportunities to create contrast and create texture. But you're not always gonna be able to completely eliminate times where you're gonna have to shoot in bright sunlight. But just think when you're out filming, how can you create more texture by adding shadows into the shot that you're filming? I've seen a lot of videos when I'm watching like overland content, and it will just be like super washed out looking, everything's bright. Well, there are ways to position your camera to try and capture some of the shadows so that you can create some depth. And that's one thing when you're filming videos outdoors, you want to tell a good story, but you also want it to be visually interesting so that it doesn't just seem amateur when you're out filming. You want to make it look like a movie. So let's do all the things that we can to make it feel more like a movie, more cinematic. Number 16 is shoot in a flat profile. So when you're outside, you're gonna have a wide range of super bright highlights and super dark shadows. And when you're shooting in like a standard profile, well, you're gonna end up losing a lot of information in the sky. It's probably just gonna turn white, or your shadows will go completely black. And if you have a camera that can shoot in log, well, it's usually a better idea to shoot in log and color grade in your editing software. Now, it's easier to just shoot in a standard and then you don't have to worry about color grading. But when you shoot in log, you're basically preserving more dynamic range. And so you can bring back your sky or bring up your shadows. So this right here is the shot ungraded. It looks washed out, no saturation, no contrast. But then I can go in and tweak the shadows and the highlights and make it look good for the scene. And then you can actually see the sky and you can see the information in the shadows and it looks great. And if you're interested in color grading and you want to learn more about how you can color grade log footage, I do have an entire course. I'll include a link down below in the description. It's on Skillshare. And if you've never tried Skillshare before, you could do a 30-day free trial and you could take this course right now. Number 17 is get the camera away from yourself. So like put the camera over there behind the bush and get a wider shot with the Joshua tree and you can actually see your subject or you moving through the scene. You don't always want to be close up on the subject and you don't always want to have like a POV camera. I've seen a lot of adventure style films and it's all from like a helmet or just all from a chest or all from like a vlogging stick. You want to try to vary up your shots. So this is why you want a tripod. And this is why you want a microphone that you can put on yourself and have the receiver on the camera. It just gives you a lot more flexibility to get these big wide shots where you can actually see someone or a car or something moving through the frame and you can get more of a landscape style shot rather than having the camera always tethered to you where it's in the style that it just feels like you're always holding the camera or you're always shooting out at the landscape. Try to put you out away from the camera and show these bigger landscape style shots. Now, number 18 is lock your focus. So I intentionally put myself out of focus because I wanted you to focus in on that plant right there, which is the world's deadliest plant. that thing is awful. Like you get near it and it feels like it jumps out and bites you. But when you're shooting your videos, you don't always want to use autofocus, especially when you're doing these big landscape style shots. The focus might hunt around, and even on cameras with good autofocus, if you're super tiny in the frame or your subject is super small, there's no guarantee that it's gonna have focus on that subject. So depending on the situation, you might wanna lock your focus. Don't always rely on auto when you're out filming. Also, it's a great tool if you wanna like foreground something and have the rest out of focus. I really don't wanna get too close to this guy. It is, oof, he's shedding. But when you do use manual focus, just make sure you know that you're in manual focus, because you don't want to come back and have lots of out of focus video. Number 19 is shoot longer than you think you need. So when you're out filming, just let the camera roll sometimes. Like, don't worry so much about saving space. It's not that hard to bring a little bit extra memory. And so I'd like to just let the camera roll. So if I'm doing something at camp, for example, and I'm have the camera positioned, well, I'm just gonna let it roll for a little while, because I might capture some extra footage that I'm gonna use in the edit. You don't always have to be hyper vigilant and being like, start, stop, start, stop. Sometimes let the cameras roll, especially if you're using like an action camera and you have it like on your chest or your head. Like, just let that roll and make sure you just have big memory cards, because if you're in a situation where you don't know what's gonna happen, just keep the cameras rolling, because in those moments are when things will happen. And as long as the camera's rolling and you have some sort of footage, you can use that to tell the story. It doesn't have to be the best footage always, but it's just something that you can use. And those are the story beats that you're gonna want when you're doing your edit. Number 20 is take notes along the way. So use your phone and take notes of locations or things that have happened or conversations that you had, just so you can always jog your memory when you're trying to build your story in the edit. And with this, also take notes by talking to camera. If you are someone who's gonna put yourself on camera and be a character in your own video, well, make sure that you're getting those moments where you explain what's going on. So before you go into a situation, just grab your camera, walk off to the side, and explain what's about to happen. Like, put it all on camera. When you're in the process and things are happening, make sure you grab your camera and capture those moments. And then once something's finished, once you're like done with whatever it is that you're doing, do a wrap up, talk to camera and talk about what just happened and maybe some thoughts or feelings or whatever's going on at that moment. Because when you get back to the edit and you're trying to do like a voiceover, you're not necessarily gonna remember everything that happened, and you're not gonna remember, how you were feeling or what was going on or specific information in these different moments. Whenever I'm out, I always just have my notes app and I'm taking notes the whole time. And then I'm making sure that I'm talking to camera and getting all these story beats. And yeah, a lot of it I don't use, but there are sections where it's like, oh, I need to set this up somehow. Great, I have a moment where I'm on the side of a dock talking about what we're about to go do on this boat. It's a great moment to use. So make sure you're capturing a lot of different elements that you could use in the edit, and also just make sure you're taking notes so that you can compile everything later when you're ready to put it all together. Number 21 is get sound effects in your location. So we talked about audio earlier when I was talking about the different microphones, but one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is grab some sound effects. And you can use your shotgun mic on top of the camera and just grab some different ambiances and different elements that you are encountering when you're out making your video. I've found that when I get back to my edit, there's a lot of different situations where I wish I had more audio, because I need to either cut out the audio or I need to try to make it seamless somehow, and I need some kind of layers underneath what's going on just to clean everything up. And when I was out in Death Valley, there was a lot of just missing audio. Part of the reason was, like, when we were at camp, we were just having conversations, me and my buddies, and I can't use any of that audio because it doesn't really make sense for the story. So I had to cut all that out, but now I have all these holes I need to fill. And the same thing, when I was driving through Death Valley, there's a lot of moments where it would have been great to use the sounds of my Jeep driving, but all I had was my music that I was playing out of my speakers. And I couldn't use that because it doesn't fit the scene. It's also copyrighted music. So I needed to fill all that with sound effects. And it's always just a good habit to get in the practice of getting some extra sound effects when you're out on location. So if there is the ocean, well, get 30 seconds of the ocean sounds for that particular ocean, because every ocean is going to sound a little bit different, especially with the wind and maybe like a train in the background, like whatever's at that location might change. So also if something specific happens, like if you're driving Jeeps through the desert, it might be a good idea to get some sound effects of just your Jeep driving. So make sure that when your camera's on a tripod and you're driving past it, there's no like music blaring out the window to mess up that sound. Just always be conscious of sound because it is so important in the edit. So number 22, let's talk about shot sequencing. When you are filming, you want to come up with different sequences that you string together to tell your story. So when you arrive to a location, you don't just want to shoot the same shot over and over. If you're out snowboarding, you don't just always want to shoot the same GoPro shot over and over. That's not going to make a good video. You want to think through how can you tell that story in a sequence and break it down into smaller sequences. So you arrive to a location, well, you need a shot of you arriving to that location. And then whatever it is that you're doing, break that up into a few different actions and shoot each one individually, and then have you exiting or have the scene end in some way, and think of that as your storytelling sequence. So when I went and did an overlanding trip in Utah, exploring some pretty weird places, there was a couple sequences that I planned. I did one around cooking one morning. So I focused on, okay, what are all the elements to tell the story of us cooking and getting ready for the day? And I shot those in a sequence so that when I strung them together, it's not the same shot over and over. It was a variety, and that variety of shots told a story. So that brings us right into number 23, which is shot variety. You don't want to do the same shot over and over, but how do you come up with ideas for what shots to do? So I like to think about it in terms of 9 shots. Some people say 7, but I added a couple extra to this concept for making adventure style films because I think there's a few key elements you need to grab. So the 9 shot rule for me is 2 wide shots, 2 medium shots, 2 close-ups, something unique and like really interesting, so something different, and then you want 2 shots of just the location, of like landscape style shots without your subject in it. So if I'm making a sequence of opening my tent in a camp location, well, I would get a couple wide shots of that from different angles. I would do some mediums that are closer in, but not super close. And then I would go into like details. So like the latches opening or like my hands pushing on something. And then I would go and get 2 just wide open shots of like the landscape. And then come up with something interesting, something unique. So maybe I would do a shot from inside the tent looking out as I open the flap up. So if you're trying to come up with a sequence to tell your story, well, you can always default back to these 9 shots, and that 9 shot will be used to create a sequence that can tell the story of that scene. Now, number 24, we've already touched on, but you want to change your angle. So you don't always want to shoot from the same direction and just like move in or move out. You want to try and get some different shots and make it a variety. So think of different ways that you could see that scene. So from this angle might be one, but then this angle might be a different angle. And I had to actually walk over there, grab the camera, come back over here, set it up, change the angle. So it does take time to do this, but it has much more of an impact when you move the camera around and you're actually seeing variety and different perspectives and different angles. It takes a lot more time than it actually looks. It takes forever to be able to get these different angles and to set things up. And if you planned an adventure that should take like a half-day hike, you're gonna end up spending the entire day because shooting is gonna take so much of your time, placing your camera, setting things up, and just thinking through how all this is gonna work together when you get into the edit. Number 25 is make sure that you're being safe. And I mean safe with your gear, safe with you, and just safe with where you're going. You have to always be a little bit vigilant about what's going on. Like, don't put yourself on a ledge and just think that nothing's gonna go wrong, because things do go wrong and stuff does happen. When you put yourself in extreme situations or you put yourself out there, even if it's not that extreme and you're just sitting on a rock, on a ledge, and you're like, I've done this 100 times. But the issue is when you're making a video, you're gonna be focused on the shots. You might be rushing through things. You might be trying to get something right before the sun goes down. So you're gonna run over there, and as you're running over, you trip and then you fall off the cliff. But you always wanna be careful with what you're doing and be vigilant and, you know, realize that sometimes you'll go to places where there might not be the best people around, and you just gotta watch out because you have expensive camera gear, you're flying a drone. Just be cautious where you're flying and also be cautious of what's around you. You know, don't completely forget about your surroundings when you're out making your videos, and especially when you're so focused on telling a story that, you know, you don't want to forget what's going on everywhere else. Nice. My batteries are charged, ready to go fly my drone for sunset. But number 26 is you want to tell a story with the videos you're creating. Nobody wants to watch just a bunch of scenes of you snowboarding down a hill and put that together to some music. That's not that exciting. People like watching stories. They like seeing a journey. They like seeing the process of going through something. So if you want to learn more on how you can tell a story, well, I made a video all about that right here. It goes through how you can tell a story in an adventure film, and I'll see you on the next video.